Hello, everyone. This is Julia from the Macedon Public Library. I'm reading another Tolkien section today selection. This time it is from the Silmarillion from Tolkien, and it's kind of the history of what happened before The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings. And I have not made my way through it. I've kind of skipped through different parts, but I will finish it someday. But the part that I'm going to be reading from today is at the very end, right before we get into the list of all the indexes of names and things like that. And it's the section that first talks about the wizards in Middle-earth. So I thought I would start there, which then kind of begins all of the stories that I've gone through so far. And I apologize, my cat might be joining us at some point pressing the screen, but since I'm just sitting here reading, I figured it wouldn't matter. So again, let me mention that this particular edition that I'm reading from was published by Ballantine Books, which is the division of Random House, and then ultimately Houghton Mifflin. So thank you so much for letting us do this during this time of self-quarantine. And again, I'm just reading a tiny little part of it. So here we go. Even as the first shadows were felt in Mirkwood, there appeared in the west of Middle-earth the Istari, whom men called the Wizards. None knew at that time whence they were, save Círdan of the Havens, and only to Elrond and to Galadriel did he reveal that they came over the sea. But afterwards it was said among the elves that they were messengers sent by the lords of the west to contest the power of Sauron, if he should rise again, and to move elves and men and all living things of good will to valiant deeds. In the likeness of men they appeared, old but vigorous, and they changed a little with the years, and aged but slowly, though great cares lay on them. Great wisdom they had, and many powers of mind and hand. Long they journeyed far and wide among elves and men, and held converse also with beasts and with birds. And the peoples of Middle-earth gave to them many names, for their true names they did not reveal. Chief among them were those whom the elves called Mithrandir and Curunir, but men in the north named Gandalf and Saruman. Of these, Curunir was the eldest and came first, and after him came Mithrandir and Radagast, and others of the Istari who went into the east of Middle-earth, and do not come into these tales. Radagast was the friend of all beasts and birds, but Curunir went most among men, and he was subtle in speech, and skilled in all the devices of smithcraft. Mithrandir was closest in council with Elrond and the elves. He wandered far in the north and west, and made never in any land any lasting abode, but Curunir journeyed into the east. And when he returned, he dwelt at Orthanc in the ring at Isengard, which the Númenóreans made in the day of their power. Ever most vigilant was Mithrandir, and it was that most doubted the darkness in Mirkwood, for though many deemed that it was wrought by the ring-wraiths, he feared that it was indeed the first shadow of Sauron returning. And he went to Dol Guldur, and the sorcerer fled from him, and there was a watchful peace for a long while. But at length the shadow returned, and its power increased, and in that time was first made the Council of the Wise that is called the White Council. And therein were Elrond and Galadriel and Círdan, and others lords of the Eldar, and with them were Mithrandir and Curunir. And Curunir, that was Saruman the White, were chosen to be their chief, for he had most studied the devices of Sauron of old. Galadriel indeed had wished that Mithrandir should be the head of the council, and Saruman begrudged them that, for his pride and desire of mastery was grown great. But Mithrandir refused the office, since he would have no ties and no allegiance, save to those who sent him. And he would abide in no place, nor be subject to any summons. But Saruman now began to study the lore of the rings of power, their making, and their history. Now the shadow grew ever greater, and the hearts of Elrond and Mithrandir darkened. Therefore, on a time, Mithrandir at great peril went again to Dol Guldur and the pits of the sorcerer, and he discovered the truth of his fears and escaped. Returning to Elrond, he said, "True, alas, is our guess. It is not one of the Uleri, as many have long supposed it. It is Sauron himself, who has taken shape again, and now grows apace. And he is gathering again all the rings to his hand, and he seeks ever for news of the one, and of the heirs of Isildur, if they live still on earth. And Elrond answered, "In the hour that Isildur took the ring and would not surrender it, this doom was wrought, that Sauron should return." "Yet the one was lost," said Mithrandir, "and while it lies still hid, we can master the enemy, if we gather our strength and tarry not too long." Then the White Council was summoned, and Mithrandir urged them to swift deeds. But Curunir spoke against him, and counseled them to wait yet, and to watch. "For I believe not," said he, "that the one will ever be found again in Middle-earth. Into Anduin it fell, and long ago I deem it was rolled to the sea. There it shall lie until the end, when all this world is broken and the deeps are removed." Therefore naught was done at that time, though Elrond's heart misgave him. And he said to Mithrandir, "None the less I forebode that the one will yet be found. And then war will arise again, and in that war this age will be ended. Indeed, in a second darkness it will end, unless some strange chance deliver us that my eyes cannot see." "Many are the strange chances of the world," said Mithrandir, "and help oft shall come from the hands of the weak when the wise falter." Thus the wise were troubled, but none as yet perceived that Curunir had turned to dark thoughts and was already a traitor in heart. For he desired that he and no other should find the great ring, so that he might too wield it himself and order all of the world to his will. Too long he had studied the ways of Sauron in hope to defeat him, and now he envied him as a rival rather than hated his works. And he deemed that the ring, which was Sauron's, would seek for its master, as he became manifest once more. But if he were driven out again, then it would lie hid. Therefore he was willing to play with peril, and he let Sauron be for a time, hoping by his craft to forestall both his friends and the enemy when the ring should appear. He set a watch upon the Gladden fields, but soon he discovered that the serpents of Dol Guldur were searching all the ways of the river in that region. Then he perceived that Sauron also had learned of the manner of Isildur's end, and he grew afraid and withdrew to Isengard and fortified it. And ever he probed deeper into the lore of the rings of power and the art of their forging. But he spoke of none of this to the council, hoping still that he might be the first to hear news of the ring. He gathered a great host of spies, and many of these were birds. For Radagast lent him his aid, divining naught of his treachery, and deeming that this was but part of the watch upon the enemy. But ever the shadow in Mirkwood grew deeper, and to Dol Guldur evil things repaired out of all the dark places of the world. And they were united again under one will, and their malice was directed against the elves and the survivors of Numenor. Therefore at last the council was again summoned, and the lore of the rings was much debated. But Mithrandir spoke to the council, saying, "It is not needed that the ring should be found, for while it abides on earth and it is not unmade, still the power that it holds will live, and Sauron will grow and have hope. The might of the elves and the elf friends is less now than of old. Soon he will be too strong for you, even without the great ring, for he rules the 9, and of the 7 he has recovered 3. We must strike." To this Curunir now assented, desiring that Sauron should be thrust from Dol Guldur, which was nigh to the river, and should have leisure to search there no longer. Therefore, for the last time, he aided the council, and they put forth their strength, and they assailed Dol Guldur and drove Sauron from his hold, and Mirkwood for a brief while was made wholesome again. But their stroke was too late, for the Dark Lord had foreseen it, and he had prepared all his movements, and Uleri, his 9 servants, had gone before him to make ready for his coming. Therefore his flight was but a feint, and he soon returned, and ere the wise could prevent him, he re-entered his kingdom in Mordor, and reared once again the dark towers of Barad-dûr. And in that year the White Council met for the last time, and Curunir withdrew to Isengard, and took counsel with none save himself. Orcs were mustering, and far to the east and the south the wild peoples were arming. Then in the midst of gathering fear and the rumor of war, the foreboding of Elrond was proved true, and the One Ring was indeed found again. by a chance more strange than even Mithrandir had foreseen. And it was hidden from Curunir and from Sauron, for it had been taken from Anduin long ere they sought for it, being found by one of the small fisher folk that dwelt by the river, ere the kings failed in Gondor. And by its finder it was brought beyond search into dark hiding under the roots of the mountains. There it dwelt until even in the year of the assault upon Dol Guldur, and it was found again by a wayfarer fleeing into the depths of the earth from the pursuit of the orcs, and passed into a far distant country, even to the land of the Periannath, the little people, the halflings who dwelt in the west of Eriador. And ere that day they had been held of small account by elves and by men, and neither Sauron nor any of the wise, save Mithrandir, had in all their councils given thought to them. Now by fortune and his vigilance Mithrandir first learned of the ring, ere Sauron had news of it. Yet he was dismayed and in doubt, for too great was the evil power of this thing for any of the wise to wield, unless like Curunir he wished himself to become a tyrant and a dark lord in his turn. But neither could it be concealed from Sauron forever, nor could it be unmade by the craft of the elves. Therefore, with the help of the Dunedain of the north, Mithrandir set a watch upon the land of the Periannath, and bided his time. But Sauron had many ears, and soon he heard rumor of the One Ring, which above all things he desired. And he sent forth the Nazgul to take it, had begun. There's a little bit more after that. But basically, the more after that is the stories that you find in The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings, the trilogy. So thank you so much for coming on this journey with me. That started way in the beginning. We just happened to be the annual Tolkien Reads Day. This has been a pleasure to share Tolkien work with you. And thanks so much. All right. Bye.